Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast. Did I scare you?
Yeah, you did a little bit. You yelled. I wasn't expecting it.
Hold on. Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast, the only podcast on the internet that doesn't...
Just in general.
Just in general.
We're the only one that exists.
Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast, the only podcast that covers everything in gaming. I don't even remember what I said.
Yeah, everything in gaming. And today we're looking at Reddit and your hot aspirations or masturbations or whatever it was.
Welcome to Game and a Half Podcast, the only podcast that covers everything in gaming. I'm Kai.
My name's Jared.
Today we're going to be covering r/true gaming topics. We're going to be looking at your opinions, your thoughts, your hot takes, and your bold ideas. Okay, let's get
articles for today.
Let's get
I'm not
started.
reading today, so you get to hear Kyle's beautiful voice reading
Yes,
these articles.
I'm glad you're all... Well, I'm not glad. I'm sure you're all happy about it. User Redshirt Eternal asks, what is your opinion on save points? Save points, for those unaware, are locations in the game where the game will save instead of letting you save wherever you want. Some games will use these systems alongside letting you create a save upon quitting. You know grammar. Others will only let you... Others will only let you save at the points. If you ever play a game with this system, what do you think of it? So save points.
This was interesting because keeping it with the modern news that's been happening, and this hasn't been. I don't think this has been confirmed in the game. But Pokemon Sword and Shield, I will always get an opportunity to talk about Pokemon Nintendo on this podcast. But Pokemon Sword and Shield come out in November, and there has been rumors that Pokemon will have an autosave feature, and I've seen a lot of split decisions on if this is a good thing or not. A lot of people didn't like the idea of manual saves because in a lot of games nowadays you only have autosaves. Most games nowadays have autosaves and they don't even have the ability to have any kind of manual save. You don't have to even worry about it. And I've heard people that have lost save progress because they've just forgotten to save because they assumed the game was going to save for them. And on the other side, there's people that do like shiny hunting, and they'll save in front of a legendary, and then they'll just reset their game to get better or do their shiny odds to get any kind of shinies. And if there is only a autosave feature, then you wouldn't be able to have that. So I didn't really answer the question of what I prefer. I don't know. I'm trying to think of games.
Personally, I think you should always... Whether you have autosave or whether you have
like
save
both
points, you should always have an ability to like pause and save. I just feel like it's something that's very easy to put in every game where you can save. And obviously, there's lots of like things you can do to break certain games using saving.
Right, that's what I was going to bring up is like
Pokemon or like increasing your chances of a certain item or
duplicating items. I know some games you've been able to dupe items because of save states.
But, like, I think the benefits outweigh the cost for the developer, because it's like, you know, there's some real-world reasons why you'd need to save a game. If you can't... If you're in a certain point and you don't want to, like, restart it at a certain point, you should be able to go back to where you were.
I've had a lot of bad experiences with... Not a lot of bad experiences, but, like, I was playing BioShock Infinite, and... I actually don't remember if I think that game has autosaves, but I'd get to a certain point and it kept erasing that section of save data. So I would always have to do like the same section over and over again. And then I ended up just stop playing it because it kept erasing my save file that I had, which was very unfortunate and sad because that's a fun game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with Kai in the sense of, I think you should just have both options. Your game should manually save and then give you the option, or your game should autosave and then give you the option to manually save. I know, like we were saying, in some instances that could break the game or cause people to, I don't know, hack or dupe in items, but...
The IJs responded to this.
Oh, we got comments! Sweet!
allowing quick save at any point removes most of the challenge from a game. It's a lazy game design decision and requires the player to design their own rules around saving in order to retain some semblance of challenge.
Well, if you think about, and I think this is the case with like the NES and Super Nintendo games that are now available on the Switch, like in Super Mario World, if you played it on the Super Nintendo, you did that in one run. Like, your only save point was you completing levels. So if you didn't complete levels, you didn't progress.
You
so
know why gaming wasn't as popular as it is now?
Because it was frustrating if people were throwing controllers.
Yeah, because that's not fun.
Right, and now in the revamped versions or the versions that are on Switch Online, you have the ability to create save states. So if you're running midway through a level of Super Mario World and need to go somewhere or need to put it down because you're frustrated, you can just save midway through this level and then jump right back into that load save. So I don't think it takes away from the challenge in the sense of it just being like an old mechanic that was used in those older games. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of games like I don't think Dark Souls has autosave. Like, you save from the campfires. So you have to get to these campfires to save. I think it adds another level of like stress in games, especially if you're like, you got through a big portion between like campfires or save states or whatever. And then you're drastically trying to get to this next save point so you can leave your house, so you don't have to do all your progress over again. But
so this refers to save-scumming. This
sounds
article.
naughty.
Save-scumming is where something happens in a game that you don't like as a result of your actions, and so you load an earlier save for a chance to undo it.
Oh yeah, I've done that so many times.
It's cheating. Is the next sentence.
Oh.
In other words, and depending on who you ask, mainly cheating yourself.
And especially like in I would say not games that have like decisions that I made and didn't want to go to, but like playing the SNES games recently, like playing Super Mario World, because I've been playing that a lot recently. If I go and I die, obviously you have to restart the level again if you die in that game. Or you just load your save state, so I can just load where I was saved again. And a lot of people would just be like at the boss, and instead of like in the old games, you die at Bowser or you die at one of Bowser's kids, you restart the whole level again. You just restart your save state and you're back at that boss battle again. So I guess in that sense it does decrease the challenge because you're not having to go through these levels over again. But I don't know, man.
I don't know. I would not want to do it over again is the problem.
Right, so you would just be like, oh, I'll just load the save state.
Just load the save state. But
Is that cheating though?
Yes. Apparently, according to the internet, it's very bad. I've definitely done it like a million times.
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's logical. Like, you can save, and then you have that save file, and you can just keep loading that save file to avoid.
Right, like before in any game you play, before you're like going up to a boss, you're like, okay, I have to save right now, because if I die, I don't want to go through this entire dungeon all over again just to get to this one boss. I already beat the dungeon, essentially, so why is it cheating that I'm just saving right here so I can just keep doing this back and forth?
Yeah, and so, like, I think there's some games where they should really work in a save feature that is not just autosave, because from a gaming perspective, you can't know when you're gonna
Need a save.
need a save. And like usually if you get an item it'll save, but there are definitely games where it's like you don't know when it's gonna save, or the autosave is a tiny little icon. You don't know if it actually saved, like Fallout 4, which is all autosave. There's no save feature. That game has so many save problems. There are actually people who modded the game to have save features.
That's
so
hilarious.
you can save.
The example I was going to use too, I think we talked about narrative-based games a lot in the last podcast, so you can go check that out. But I think in narrative games...
It hasn't been posted yet.
No, it's posted.
It'll be posted by the time that this posts.
No, it's posted.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, episode 4. This is 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's already posted. Go check it out. Game and a Half, official, youtube.com.
Shameless plug.
But
to our own audience.
Games that are narrative heavy, like if you're playing a game where you're really, I think, involved in the story, I think having to pause the game and go to a save state would really like pull you out and break you from that narrative. So having just that constant save at like big, crucial, important moments in the game, I think it is, I really like it in that instance. But then I guess it depends on the person. Like if the game decides this is an important point to save, and you decide that you want to save in between those 2 points, then you don't really have the option to.
Yeah, I'm reading people's opinions on this.
What does the internet
very
think about?
angry, all of them.
But the internet is always angry all the time.
it seems that a lot of adults prefer to be able to save on their own. Well,
Interesting.
there are people who say, as an adult, and then comma, which there's like a bunch of these comments, that they appreciate being able to save whenever because they don't know when they're going to have to do adult things.
That sounds like a weird, like, old person, like, comment. Like, back in my day when I had to manually save. I don't like this weird auto-save feature.
Then there's a bunch of people who are probably also adults who are like, it's cheating to be able to save. Like, you have to be able to get through a section of the game to get to the next autosave point or the, like, save checkpoint to be able to do it.
I think it just depends on the game you're playing. Like, I don't know. I mean...
I don't know. There's definitely, like... I remember in Dark Souls, this pissing me off because you have to go to the stupid fire pit.
Yeah, the campfires.
That's so frustrating.
Right, and it adds this level of distress where you're like, okay, I've saved. I've been playing for, like, 2 hours. I haven't seen a campfire yet. And you're like... I've had a lot of progress. If I die right now, which dying is the main mechanic of Dark Souls.
Right.
So, I mean...
So it's like, that's just like, you should be able to just save.
Well, does that make... Oh, talking about Dark Souls and it being just the front runner of difficulty in games, is that what would make it difficult? The fact that you have to, like...
Yeah, I think
you go a certain way, and you save, and then you get some progress, and you die, and you have to do that save over again. Is that the only reason why... I mean, there's other things, like the mechanics and the combat and everything that also make the game difficult.
I think that's one of the things that makes Dark Souls very frustrating. Because I think, like, if you just die, and then you kind of went, like, slightly before you just died,
right,
you'd be like, oh. Though I will say that, like, okay, if you take out the save mechanic, and then you have to save yourself, I definitely get into games where I'll forget to save.
Yeah, and that's the problem for a lot of people.
So then you risk playing more than 2 hours and dying and not saving.
Or if you're in that sense where, like, a lot of areas clearly in the game are combat, and you have to manually save, and you're trying to manually save, and, like, in the pause menu, you're getting attacked by enemies, like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I think games should have both options.
Yeah.
Depending on the game. I think games that are more narrative based, just they take it out of the player's hands to make it more involved in the experience or in the story itself. Yeah.
All right. So our next topic
Save your games.
Is
Save your soul.
What?
I said save your soul.
Is by user throwaway LSJ KCNASND.
I was like, is it something backwards?
No.
Oh.
So,
I was thinking of palindrome, but that's the same way forward and back.
Yeah.
That's not what that means. Go ahead.
User throwaway thing I cannot pronounce says handcrafted worlds are of far more value than fresh every time procedurally generated worlds.
And I know that you have an immediate opinion about this, so I'll let you go first.
I do have an immediate.
Because I know your examples.
Love procedurally generated worlds. I think they're way more interesting than handcrafted worlds because, like, they are different every time. Like, a handcrafted world will inevitably get old over time.
Right.
It will wear down. You'll be like, eh. But if it's procedurally generated well, like, obviously, if there's no difference between each generation of what's being created by the computer, then it's going to be boring. But for the most part, if you procedurally generate things really well, it's always fun. It's always different.
And I was thinking the example of, like, No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky has a massive procedurally generated world. And just I guess, playing devil's advocate, there's a lot of worlds that look different, but there's a lot of worlds that look pretty much the same. Like, we've played a lot of No Man's Sky, and there's a lot of worlds that are just like, this world is white, and it's a little snowy, but the world itself looks very similar to other worlds that you might have visited. So I guess in that sense, it's like, well, this is a procedurally generated world, and it's supposed to have these random worlds that are different, but they're not looking very different from the previous
and the problem
one.
with No Man's Sky is it's its own worst enemy because procedurally generated worlds would be a lot easier to do if you could do the same worlds for everyone, but because the universe is so big in that game, they have to keep the parameters of what the worlds can be so limited to not have, like, crazy, outliers in, like, playability. Like, if you go to a planet and all of a sudden everything's just, like, right angles, just, like,
that'd be great.
Like, you can't land anywhere. You have to be able to, like, rein in the computer from creating stuff like that. So you have to keep everything very close because there's so much in that game. So, like, yeah, that game has problems procedurally generated things, but there's no way you could make that game handcrafted.
And then I think of examples like Minecraft, where Minecraft is also a game where you boot it up and you're getting different worlds, but they're less different in like the way they look and more different in the like things are just placed in different areas. You have resources that are in different areas that kind of swaps that. So I mean, is that better than a world that is handcrafted and very different from another handcrafted world, or is it like your Minecraft and my Minecraft experience, it's going to look pretty much the same, but things are just going to be in different locations?
Well, and that's one of my problems with like handcrafted worlds in games is that inevitably a human being created it.
Right.
And like,
I mean, technically they're all like handcrafted, essentially, just computer generated to be different.
I guess
every time.
I mean, it's computer crafted versus hand built.
I get, yeah.
But like in Minecraft, you'll find dungeons, like a dungeon,
right?
And then like you'll be like, oh, this is great, and then all of a sudden you just hit a wall. Like no game designer would ever do that. Right. It's frustrating, but you'll be like, oh, okay, well this doesn't like logically make any sense that it'll continue down this path. But like, there's definitely, I mean, games like, I'll bring up Dark Souls, where you just like, you enter something, or like Skyrim, where you'll enter like a path, and it's definitely just feels like you're just, like it was made for you. Like, it's not realistic. It's not part of the environment. It's just like a hole in the ground, and you're like, oh, okay.
And it's funny, because when Final Fantasy 13 came out, and there's other Final Fantasies that had this quote-unquote problem, if you see it as a problem, but it was like defined as the hallway simulator, because it was just like there's like these beautiful vistas around you, but your parameter of walking was just rectangles, and that's all you did was walk through this until you hit a cutscene and a fight cinematic, and
obviously procedural generation wouldn't necessarily help with that,
right,
since you can't move past those triangles anyway. But I'd 100% rather have a badly made procedurally generated game than I would a poorly made hand-built game.
Yeah, and narrative has just been on my mind and on our topics recently, but then in a more open, I usually, obviously, well, I guess not necessarily, so as I say, usually procedurally generated worlds are open, but there's games that are like roguelikes where it's like dungeons that you go through, and those dungeons are procedurally generated, and that's not necessarily an open world. Yeah. But in the sense of telling like a narrative, do you think that those games could have a procedurally generated world if it's tied to like a specific? I guess No Man's Sky has a narrative, kind of. I guess just level of narrative.
I think it'd be really interesting to see like a horror game that's procedurally generated. Like if they could, if it was like a continually procedurally generating forest, like I think that would be a really cool thing to explore. Because like, especially because like horror, it's like endless.
Right.
So like, you know, the only way you could make it big enough to like people not to notice that human beings created it is to have a computer generate most of it. So.
Is there any like less linear open world horror games? Like I think most horror games are pretty confined to a space, because because in an open world game you can do whatever you want essentially, and in a horror game they need to set up these moments, these controlled moments where you could experience the horror or the adrenaline of the game. So I don't even know if it would work in an open world.
Yeah, I don't know if that exists, but
start a new genre: open world horror. Open world horror.
Open world horror.
It's the whole horrors of open worlds.
Yeah, no, the internet has nothing for us.
Interesting. That's an interesting concept.
I think it's just really hard to do.
Well, yeah, again, like because it's a very controlled environment. That's what horror games are. You're usually going down hallways or rounding corners, and things get quiet and jump scares happen at this moment. I think they would have to program the AI. See, I don't even know, because you were just like talking about a forest, like an open world forest, and that would be really cool. But like, what would be the horror aspect of this procedurally?
People say the
world?
Evil Within too, but it's definitely not open world.
I think, yeah,
it's super path. I would also count it as like a straight horror game.
Evil Within is pretty horror-y.
I mean, it's listed as a third-person survival horror game, but
yeah, I don't know. because I haven't played Evil Within 2, but I think it's a little more open in the sense of like you don't have a necessary like
it's not Outlast.
right. You have an objective, but it's like, okay, here's this house. Let me go explore this, and you can find like files, and you can find more stuff that'll go about the lore and everything of the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think both procedurally generated worlds and handcrafted worlds have the benefits to each one of them. Yeah. I think with procedurally generated, you get, hopefully you get more interesting experiences between players, because in most games, most people are experiencing the same, at least physical game. I mean, they may be feeling something different between who's playing it and nostalgia and experiences, but for the most part, we're all visually experiencing the same thing. Where procedurally generated worlds mix that up with adding difference in every player's experience, and then I guess that just adds more to the conversation about the game. It's like, like when No Man's Sky first came out, everyone was posting about like the worlds they've seen and the creatures they've seen, and when it first came out, it felt less procedurally generated. Yeah. It felt less like a world that, and I think that just was the problem, because the game was massive, it was huge, so it was kind of like a catch-22 for it.
Yeah. Well, I also want to know like how much procedural generation goes into games like Red Dead. Like there has to be some. They can't, like, even like at a base level, like texturing has to be done procedurally, because you're not going to hand draw every texture on every ground in a game that is literally like thousands of miles.
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe these huge worlds are just handcrafted. Because I mean, there's worlds that are bigger than Red Dead that I don't think I'd consider procedurally generated. Like,
it's not like the world isn't necessarily completely procedurally generated, but at the base level, just playing through games like that, like at a certain point, there's not enough man hours in the world in developing a game where you could like place bush by bush by bush by bush. So I'm sure they're using a program,
giving like the computer the assets.
Like you give it the assets, and then it fills in at a random pattern with certain parameters, obviously, because if it was completely random, then you just have like a square of perfectly like ones and then different ones. So like, but with parameters where it fills in like all the stuff, like trees, like there has to be a way for them to procedurally generate trees. To make it look real. Yeah, to make it look real. Because like having to place each individual tree as a human being, you're gonna make it look not right. Right. It's gonna look super weird. So
that'd be interesting to like ask. We'll get the Red Dead team, Rockstar, to come on the podcast.
We'll call Rockstar Canada up and be like, hey,
they're close friends.
But I mean, speed dial. I mean, in that way, it's like, every world has to be at least a little bit procedurally generated.
Right.
So like, but obviously in this
I would say depending on the scale.
Yeah, it's like, it's how handcrafted does something feel, where you can notice it, where it's like, there's definitely a path you're supposed to follow, and you're like, it's the point of all this stuff around me that you built, because I'm not going to see any of it, because it's definitely supposed to be following this path.
Well, because they want it to look like it's a world that could be lived in. But the problem with that is, we talked about this again on the other podcast, is you're making all these beautiful assets around this very linear game, and you want to entice people to explore them, but they can't, and it just makes people frustrated.
Or it's worse than that. You make all these beautiful, like, environmental assets, but there's no reason to explore it. It's just empty space, which is a problem with Red Dead and other games. Is it's like, look at all this that we created for you, and it's like, it's just as boring as the real world. Right. I'd go on a walk in the forest if I wanted to have this much fun.
I think it's used as like if I was dropped in the desert in real life, I'd walk aimlessly around the world and die. Exactly. That's just like what would happen in real life. That doesn't
seem entertaining to me.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on to the next topic.
The meat.
Gross.
The meat.
Posted by user scrolling2654, which definitely doesn't sound like a bot.
Not a bot 42.
Not a bot 42. Will the future of gaming be more VR or AR centric?
If you don't know, VR is virtual reality and AR is augmented reality. Yes. VR is obviously like Oculus Rift and PlayStation VR, where you have weird headsets on your head. And augmented reality is things like Pokemon Go. And not all of Pokemon Go, clearly it's where you can like use the camera and you can catch Pokemon in your real environment. You can interact things with the real world, like the Harry Potter game that just came out by Niantic as well. And then Minecraft has their, oh gosh, I'm gonna screw this up. It's not called Minecraft World, it's called something else. Minecraft World? Minecraft Earth, which is their AR version of Minecraft. I think VR is more popular right now, and especially PlayStation VR. It seems like PSVR is getting a lot of games recently. There was a point like right after VR came out where it's just like silence. There's like no games on VR, and people were like, "Oh, I thought this was gonna be huge," and then it kind of died out. But it seems like it's getting a little more and more popular, more fleshed out. I don't know, but AR's has some good games and has some good interesting qualities and interesting mechanics that could be used for games. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like, you need physical space for both of them.
Right.
Theoretically.
Well,
I mean, I guess you could be seated playing VR, but I guess that's not really the point.
Yeah.
Sit in a chair. But, like, AR, you definitely need a dedicated physical space.
Right.
Like, even with Pokemon Go, you have to have a location where you can point the camera and that it's going to have to display an asset. And obviously that's funny sometimes because it'll be, like, on your grandmama's head or in someone else's car. But, like...
Yeah, I mean, I assume they're talking in the parameters of, like, video games. Do they say video games or just which one will be more popular?
It's gaming.
Okay.
This is a gaming...
Oh, this is a gaming podcast?
This is a gaming podcast.
No one
this
told
isn't Let's Talk About Technology
No
podcast.
one told me. I think that I think people can do really cool things with AR, and I'm really excited to see what is done. I don't know. I again, VR is more popular right now, but I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if it's more popular or if it's just seen as like the future more. Because like,
well, it's more popular in the sense of it just there's more games on VR systems than AR.
I guess.
And AR, I mean, there's games on VR that actually not. I would say that are actual games, but have like
I mean, I definitely
20
remember,
hours of gameplay.
I definitely remember like before VR became big, there was like the Slender AR game, and there was.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of AR games. Also, there's the what's the PlayStation game that came out like a long time ago that was
The card one?
Yeah.
I Have Judgment.
I Have Judgment, which is an AR game.
Yeah.
So AR has been in the gaming space much longer than VR has, or at least readily available to people much longer. Obviously, cell phones making it easy for people to. Sorry
about the earthquake that just happened.
It makes it easier for people, more accessible.
I think it'd be cool if they started like combining the two, like having, and I guess
that would be AR. Even if you combine the two, it's still AR.
What if people are wearing virtual reality?
It's
like
still
headsets?
Part of. If you're
reality.
Augmenting reality.
Yeah.
Unless the entire world is created.
Well, because there's things you can go and do where it's like not obstacle courses, but there's rooms built specifically and one-to-one with the game. And you put on a VR headset and you go through this room and you're interacting with things that are actually in this environment.
Yeah.
And it's built for the game that you're viewing through the virtual reality headset. So
that's the combination of both of them.
Right. Which I think is super cool.
And I think there is. Obviously, you're augmenting your reality while playing in virtual reality.
Right.
But augmented reality really relies on physical space.
Right. You're interacting with the world itself.
You're transforming your physical space to be a game. Mm-hmm. Which I think is way more interesting than VR, personally. Like, once again, this goes back to the whole, like, handcrafted versus, like, procedurally generated. Obviously, a lot of AR games are procedural in the sense that, like, Pokemon Go procedurally generates where Pokemon are going to be. It has an algorithm that runs that has a rate of being able to see each Pokemon, and it changes consistently. And then, like, oh, okay, there's this Pokemon here, and then, like, you pull up your phone, and that's all done by a computer. It's not like someone is like, this Pokemon goes here geographically.
I think AR large scale with video games will be popular, but less for like the average consumer themselves. Like, there might be more places you can go and experience these things. I think VR will be more connected to your home, and well, I mean, because you're not gonna be walking around with a VR headset. Maybe you will. I don't know. But like right now, they just created the big Halo event. And there you can do like 3v3 Halo matches in well, I guess VR and AR, they have an arena that was built specifically for this build of like this Halo game that they created, and every person has a headset and a gun in their hand, so they're interacting with the world through the VR headset. But the game is mapped to the world around them as well. So I think more things like that will become more and more popular. But again, with AR, you have to have the space for it. So it's going to be in big things like warehouses and gaming events where they have the space for these large scale replica arenas to build.
I mean, in that specific case of AR gaming, yes.
Right.
But like, if you started designing, like, imagine playing a platformer in 3-dimensional space. So, like, you have a table that has the sign. So if it builds the world in a square box that's 3-dimensional, and you can walk around it while you play a platformer, and it uses that mechanic. So, like, yes, you can see it traditionally in the 2-dimensional space, but then you can walk to the side, and you can see the character running towards you in the 3-dimensional space. I mean, that's... I hope someone develops augmented reality to get to that point, but I mean, obviously there exists currently tables, like they played Minecraft on like a big table. Where
that's what I was just looking up. It was called the HoloLens.
Yeah.
And the HoloLens was they had a large table and you put on this headset, which is kind of like virtual reality, but again, you're augmenting your existing reality. And this table created this entire world of Minecraft, and in there you could essentially play and experience Minecraft through the HoloLens itself. And that's kind of what Minecraft Earth is, just on, I guess, on a smaller scale and more on your phone than having this headset that you have to wear.
It's also less nauseating than VR.
Right. Yeah, VR is really, really nauseating because your brain... I've seen, it's cool because I've seen like the little... rigs where people are like strapped at the waist and they have like a little like
the little
treadmill they're running on, or the little like rolling pad, and like that would be cool, but not everybody has a treadmill rolling pad in their house. So you're sitting on, or you're standing, like when we were playing the I don't remember what the really big shooter that was like first on PSVR.
I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I don't either. But when you're standing and you're like walking and your eyes are seeing yourself moving forward, and then your legs aren't. It just
makes you very dizzy.
It makes you very nauseated. And I played it's like Gran Turismo or The Crew in virtual reality, and that is very nauseating as well.
Yeah, I mean, the best that VR is gonna get, you'd still need a physical space to be able to have it in, and it also would have to include, which would then make it part of augmented reality. Like as you said, the whole Halo thing where they had to build an arena to be able to have the VR go around in. Like, I think that's the incredible thing about augmented reality, is that for VR to be as successful as everyone thinks it's going to be, it needs augmented reality to go along with it. Like, I don't think we're going to get to a point where we can trick our brains into thinking we're actually moving when we're lying still, so therefore you're always going to need an environmental, like...
And it's one thing that's really cool if you're playing a game and you're like, you see a platform you can climb up, and you reach out and you can feel that platform and you can climb up, and you're seeing that happen in the game. Like, that's a really cool experience, and brings people more into having it feel like reality than just, like, tricking your brain.
I can just imagine, like, a bunch of, like, 16 to 25-year-old nerds running around an arena with like plastic guns shooting each other and like shouting profanities.
Like in your the view of like the headset, it's like this whole firefight, and like outside it's like a quiet room, and it's like gun clicks.
That's ridiculous.
They have it. We should go to this Halo event. I don't remember what it's called, but we should do it and go play.
I'm also surprised that it hasn't
gotten more popular.
I mean, even here in LA, that's not really something that's readily available. Like, you can't just, like laser tag was huge in the 1990s. Why can't they just make laser tag with VR headsets?
And I think it's probably expensive. That's why a lot of people don't go to these events, because they probably are pretty pricey to do, because it is.
Well, also, like, I definitely would be, like, jumping and rolling. And, like, jumping and rolling with, like, an $800 VR headset is probably not.
And not only that, like, they have, like rigs on them. Like, they have packs on their back and, like, headsets.
Also, I should mention that Disneyland also has a VR experience now, which I haven't done because I don't have Disneyland money. But in the Star Wars world, there's a Stormtrooper VR experience that they've been doing, which is also an augmented reality experience, because you walk through the world that they created for you while also experiencing virtual reality. So... but apparently it's very fun. People have enjoyed it. I don't know.
I tried looking up like AR like shooting arenas, and it just gave me shooting ranges in Arkansas. That didn't work.
That explains a lot about our country.
Augmented reality shooting games. Let's see. A Bluetooth shooting game for your Android phone.
I definitely remember those, like, back in the, like, mid 2012, 2013. That was, like, a big thing. Like, you could play it with your friends, you'd hold your phone, and, like, you'd run around the room, and you'd try to, like, shoot each other through the phone, and you had, like, a health bar.
It's really cool.
You're gonna have to do virtual reality, because people don't think of that as augmented reality, by the way.
I guess it's... Oh, yeah.
It is. You're quite literally augmenting reality by creating a physical space so people can do this.
Right. And interacting with that space. That's the biggest thing, is here to interact with this space itself.
But they're like, oh, it's the best we can get in virtual reality, so...
Right.
Also, we need better terms. Like, virtual and augmented reality is so vague. Virtual is super vague, because technically all of augmented reality is virtual reality, and if you're augmenting reality with virtual means, it's also virtual reality. It's very confusing. There needs to be more specific terms.
So this is the Halo Recruit thing that they have at this Halo event that you do. And you put on the headset and you go into
watching a video and an audio medium.
This is just like a game on Windows.
Boring.
This was boring. I was trying to find video of the actual, like...
They're not gonna give that away.
But it's already... I've seen it.
You gotta go there to experience it. Yeah. So, will the future of gaming be more VR or AR centric?
I think it'll be a combination of both. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be
It won't
one
be
or the
one
other.
or the other. It'll be both growing equally. It's just that also these terms have such like poorly defined parameters that it's impossible to answer that question. Like, I think as we discover more and more about this, we like will. Oh, this looks
far worse than I remember it looking.
This looks terrible.
So see, it's like the arena.
Wow.
And it's like these little characters that run around the rendered arena.
That looks awful.
VR.
Yeah. We'll link this video into the description of the Halo Outpost Discovery. But
yes, Outpost Discovery. That was the event.
It looks terrible.
Yeah, I remember it looking much cooler when I watched the video the first time.
No, I love that they put AR/VR at the bottom. That's how poorly defined our terms are.
And I think that's the only thing. Like your question, which I don't remember your name, but I think it was hard to pronounce.
His name was user scrolling 2654
or her.
You're right.
But it was which one is going to be more popular, and I think the problem is like the terms are so loose, and the terms are we don't know what to define what is AR and VR, and even this video that has, I guess, both, they have it referenced as both. So I think that in the future, it's going to be, again, hopefully worded better, but a combination of both of these things. And I hope it does get popular, because that's really cool, being able to experience these games not only sitting on your couch or standing in your living room, but actually like going somewhere where you can experience a world and interact with the things in the world inside of our reality.
Yeah. Also, like, not Google Glass, but I'm totally ready for like a glasses-based augmented reality where like I can put on glasses.
You don't think people are gonna be like distracted by that, like driving and like a Mario mushroom like slides across the street?
Not games.
Oh,
like real world.
This is a gaming podcast. Don't bring your random shit in here.
Real world practical stuff, like directions on your glasses, so you don't have to look at your phone while driving, so you're more focused. I mean, there's lots of car companies who have tried incorporating augmented reality in the dash, and every time what happens is they realize people are just distracted by it, and they're gonna run
just staring at this screen.
Ooh, it's a terrible plan. But I don't know. I think it's just because the generation I grew up in, like, where we were coming up with all this stuff that, like, the future was going to have. Like, we had harnessed technology enough where we were like, oh, this is going to be something cool. And then people just kind of, like, riffed on ideas that were going to happen. So, like, before Google Glass was a thing, there was a lot of companies that were like, we're going to make glasses, or we're going to make contacts with augmented reality. But they had no means of actually doing it. So, like, I was still waiting for all this technology to come out and be available for people, so.
And I could play Mario Kart in my car in real life.
That's a terrible. Tesla's pretty much there.
Yeah,
you know, it's terrifying. Just all of it's going to be autopilot.
Every Tesla comes pre-programmed with a blue shell. So There you go.
Oh God. Yeah, and it's it's gonna be Mario Kart in your Tesla. You'll go to Elon's new like racetrack, and you'll just you'll select your character, drive around in your Teslas.
That'd be so cool.
No, it's a terrible idea. They're so fragile.
But aside from like the danger and like the health risks, that'd
The
be pretty
money.
cool.
It's a billionaire's game.
Billionaire's game. Yeah,
I'm gonna buy this Tesla for today.
It'll be like the Hunger Games for rich people, and they'll just race these races.
They'll sell a Tesla bumper kit.
Yeah, there you go.
Or all of the Teslas will be so good at being able to like avoid collision that they'll all just like
they'll have like little floaties that boost out when they like get close to something. So
yeah. Well, based on the rate of which our friend's Tesla malfunctions,
yes.
I don't think that's going to be a very safe thing to do.
Wait for it. VR and AR? No. Mario Kart Tesla racing.
That's
the
AR.
next thing. I guess that
That is AR.
But if you're just
It's also VR because it's virtual. It's very confusing. We need to find terms.
fix the terms.
There are smarter people than us who study this stuff that really need to like.
What would we call it?
Well, we are not the people to solve this problem. There are people with PhDs
That
in
can solve this much-
in user interface design and gaming design who can easily come up with better terms than AR and VR.
AR and VR.
Yeah.
AVR.
AVR. Augmented virtual reality. We solved it!
There you go. You're welcome, whoever's going to take it.
We're going to create the first story-oriented game with AVR.
There's another word we made up to. I don't remember what it was.
I don't remember what it was either.
Story-oriented AVR game.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today.
Stay classy. I took it because Kyle.
Monster!
You read the story, so we had to switch.
Okay. All right.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye!
Good night.